What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. Here it is Tuesday, August 29th, 2017 here, almost to the end of the month. Almost out of summer here. School's already starting up in a lot of places around the country, including around here locally. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, getting ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And let's just get right on into it. Obviously, the big news continues to be this disaster down in Houston, Texas. The storm is starting to move up the coast toward Louisiana, but there's still huge amounts of rain just pouring all over the place. In some places in Houston, the water is 8 feet deep on the roads, and it's going to continue to get worse. This is turning into an epic fail. Remember the other day we were talking about how there were these two reservoirs to the west of Houston, and the Army Corps of Engineers said we're going to have to open the floodgates because otherwise they're going to overtop. Too late. They already overtopped, and the water is heading down into Houston. And there's been another levee that has also been breached, by which I presume they mean overtop as opposed to collapse. But there's a concern that one of the dams at the reservoir, the Addicks Dam, could potentially burst, in which case downtown Honolulu, downtown Houston, you're going to just wipe it off the map. It's just going to be gone here. And it is horrible. Now, finally, after all this time, and because of the problems with the reservoirs and the dams, Houston is now ordering evacuations days after it told people to stay indoors, shelter in place for Harvey. And a lot of people are already out there saying they should have evacuated before. The mayor is saying we thought more people would be at risk trying to get out on the roads than at home. Obviously, the situation has very much changed. So far, 6 people have been killed in the storm. Thousands are homeless, and 7 million people, 1/4 of Texas population, are now basically in a federally designated disaster area. Now, Trump went on down there. He got a briefing. He's basically coordinating the federal response for disaster release here. And everybody's saying, what the heck was going on? Because we weren't told to evacuate. We weren't told how serious the storm was going to be. And there's a very interesting story that has surfaced. This is out of Blacklisted News. Apparently, somebody who had a friend inside the Houston City Council sent out a tweet to all of her friends saying, I'm not trying to panic you, but I have a friend inside the City Council, and they're not being straight with you. The storm is going to be 3 times worse than what the news is saying because they don't want to panic like they had back in Hurricane Rita. And so basically, you need to get out of Houston and make sure you're taken care of. Now, this post went viral to the point where high-ranking Houston politicians and regional media outlets basically had to address it. And this is what they did. They told the people of Houston to ignore this as fake news. You can't trust anything on the internet. And you should only pay attention to the government warnings and reputable media outlets, which were forecasting only 24 inches of rain instead of the 50 that they got. And there is a lesson to be had there. That people who are on the internet, independent media, social media, they're not politicians, for the most part, they're not businessmen, they're not professional propagandists, they're trying to get the information out. And in hindsight, the people of Houston would have been far better off listening to what was on that internet, paying attention to what was on that internet, than the official pronouncements from the government and the reputable media sources. Because the reputable media sources are drowning in all that water, along with all this other stuff. Now, Louisiana's Cajun Navy has just arrived in Texas to help rescue people from the flood. I mean, this is out there. They put out a call. Anybody with a boat and a cell phone, radio, come on in and help us out. And so a whole bunch of volunteers from Louisiana's Cajun country have come on up there with their airboats to help deal with it. Unfortunately, the looters are shooting at them, and in a couple of cases have tried to steal the airboats. And come on, guys. This is a time when everybody should be pulling together, not taking advantage of this situation. And by the way, yes, there's price gouging going on. It's almost shameless behavior. It paints a very dark portrait of the American character. All right, let's take a phone call here. Veronica in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Is there a possibility that the government could bail out insurance companies from paying claims for this mega disaster to keep from bankrupting them? If property insurers go bankrupt because they cannot pay the claim resulting from a Houston-type disaster, then homeowners would be stuck paying for mortgages on properties that are uninhabitable. Families would be homeless through no fault of their own. Is that a possibility this could happen?
I think there's a possibility. I mean, Trump can pretty much do whatever he wants. Once you've declared a disaster area, you can basically come on in and say there's going to be disaster relief. We're going to pour all this money in there and make it available. Now, that being said, I want to issue a word of caution, and this comes out of Claire and my experience with the Northridge earthquake, because when that one hit, we didn't live all that far from the epicenter, and when it hit, I mean, to give you an example, we had ceiling light fixtures pull out of the ceiling. There was one place in our living room that was cracked so badly you could look from the inside to the outside through the 2 layers of the walls. I'd had some very expensive computer equipment literally shook itself into pieces in the office. I mean, everything was over. The refrigerator was destroyed. It was, you know, a nasty, nasty situation. Now, FEMA came on in, and they brought in all this money, and ordinary people really didn't get to see much of it at all. In fact, Claire and I didn't get any. Most of that money went in to building a new emergency command post up there in the Hollywood Hills behind the Hollywood sign. And that's really what they spent all the money for. So there's money going to be made available. How much will percolate down to individual homeowners, we don't really know. But it's, again, when you have that huge influx of money coming on in, everybody starts getting greedy, everybody starts getting political and saying, well, yes, I know the money is there to do this, but really we need a new one of that. And that was certainly our experience out there following the Northridge earthquake.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cheery.
Well, there's something
well,
there's something you need to remember about the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's ostensibly there to deal with disasters like this, but its primary function is the protection and continuity of the federal government itself, even against the wrath of the American people. Most Americans don't understand FEMA is really there to help the government through disaster, not you. That's why their response at Katrina was so poor. They really weren't in that mindset of, oh, let's go help those people. Now they are because of the tremendous negative backlash that happened following Katrina.
So if we want we the people back, we're going to have to do that ourselves, aren't we?
Well, ultimately, we always did. I mean, the big lie that we could just sit back and let the government take care of us was part of the mechanism of enslavement. And now they're trying to make it illegal for you to take care of yourself. You're not allowed to live off the grid. You're not allowed to homeschool. You're not allowed to catch rainwater on your own property. In a lot of places, more and more, you're not allowed to grow food on your own land because they want to keep you dependent on these corporate providers of food, water, medicine, electricity, and when that infrastructure fails, most people are not really prepared to take care of themselves. The preppers are, and Hurricane Harvey is a good example of why prepping is not something that the fringo conspiracy wackos are doing. It's something everybody ought to be doing, whether you call it a hurricane kit or an earthquake kit or a tsunami kit or an, oh, gee, the government is going to collapse kit. It doesn't really matter because what's in the kit is pretty much the same stuff.
Well, I had talked to a government official at one point over a different subject matter, but he said, oh, yeah, these crazy preppers. And I said, do you carry a spare tire in your trunk? And he said, well, of course I do. And I said, oh, you're one of them. I mean, I said, how dare you carry a spare tire in your trunk? I said, wouldn't you love it if to be the person in your neighborhood who had a generator and could put a sign in your yard that said, I have hot coffee and you can charge your cell phones at my home. Come on in.
Well, it would be a wonderful,
that
wonderful thing to do. Just a word of caution that whatever you have set up to charge the cell phones has the appropriate filtering, because the little portable generators, they put out a very noisy AC signal. And plugging computer equipment into one of those portable generators is generally not a good idea unless you know the power supply is designed to take a very noisy source current.
Right, but I mean, my point to him was, wouldn't it feel good to be able to help your neighbors when they have nothing?
Yes, 1 cup of coffee,
And,
1 vote.
Yeah, I guess that would feel pretty good. And I said, yeah, it would. I said, us preppers, and because he didn't realize I am one, I said, we preppers aren't so bad, are we?
Well, you know, you know what the joke is.
Opinion.
You know what the joke is going to be right now. How do you tell the Houston preppers? They're the ones not eating out of trash dumpsters.
Right.
Yeah.
And the looting is a horror story too. It's just so tragic.
Yeah, that shows a side of human nature that I think we all ought to be ashamed of.
Yeah, it is. But, well, we'll see how it all turns out. I appreciate everything you do, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the show.
Oh, well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. And by the way, there are some items that you can have in your prepping kit that you intend to share with your neighbors. Obviously, with all this talk about nuclear missiles, Claire and I have got potassium iodate, which are these pills you take to protect your thyroid from nuclear contamination. And we got bottles and bottles of them. If a nuclear weapon goes off somewhere on this island and we're not instantly killed, we got enough of these pills to give to everybody in the neighborhood. Say, here, take these, protect your thyroid. And if they still think I'm a kooky, wacko, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, that's fine. I'll give the pills to somebody else. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the aftermath of Hurricane, now Tropical Storm Harvey. And it is now heading on Louisiana, which has still not really fully recovered from all the damage to their levee and flood control systems from Hurricane Katrina. So there could be a lot more problems going on there. So far, we're aware of 10 major refineries that had to shut down due to Hurricane Harvey. And as Harvey moves toward Louisiana, more could be shut down. This is going to create a gas shortage. And frankly, if I were you, I would get out and top off the tank and maybe your emergency gas can as well today, because there's going to be an impact on gas prices. We still don't know how many of those oil drilling, oil pumping platforms in the Gulf of Mexico were damaged. They're going to have to do an inventory of those once the weather starts to clear. So there could be a real problem there as well. And again, I have to tell you, I'm appalled at all these people who are using Harvey for their personal political agenda. Apparently over at the University of Tampa, they had a professor, Ken Story, who literally came on out and said Texas deserved Hurricane Harvey because they supported Donald Trump in the 2016 election. There's a happy ending to this story. This idiot has been let go from his job. So, now, if Ken Story thinks that Hurricane Harvey was somehow being divinely directed, I have a question for him. Remember when George Bush told us that God told him to invade Iraq? And all the Bible bangers scrabbled around after him. Oh, yes, it's the will of God. It's the will of God. You don't see these kind of disasters hit Iraq and places like that. They don't get monster floods and hurricanes and tornadoes. It's all hitting here in the United States of America. Kind of makes you wonder if Bush lied when he said God told him to invade Iraq. Because it sure does look like the wrath of God has come down on America yet again, and striking right at the heart of our oil industry, which is the lifeblood of conventional warfare. So before you start mouthing off about Texas deserved Harvey because God hates them for voting for Trump, just think about that for a while. Anyway, the looting and price gouging following the hurricane has gotten so bad that the Texas Attorney General is already out there saying they got to do something about it. They have to enforce caps on price. Apparently, a case of water is now $99. And in a lot of areas, the flood from Hurricane Harvey has already compromised the municipal water systems. And again, if you are a prepper, there are some very nice filters out there. I wish I could remember the name of it. I should have brought it up for the show here. But the one that we have is so good. You can literally pour raw sewage in the top of it and get clean, usable water out the bottom. And that would be something that right now a lot of people in Texas could be using. So this is a textbook example of why you should have some kind of emergency preparations, because bad things will happen. Hurricanes, reactor meltdown, World War III, and you cannot count on the government to take care of you. They sell you that promise in exchange for your taxes. Oh, yeah, we'll be there for you. And I have to acknowledge FEMA's doing a much better job now than they did for Hurricane Katrina. But they can't take care of everybody. They just don't have enough people. You have to take responsibility for the safety of yourself and your loved ones. And by the way, prepping is not just buying a bunch of stuff. It's a lifestyle, because you have to train how to use that stuff. You don't wait till the disaster hits and then open up the package and read the instructions. It really is a mindset, a way of thinking. Now then, again, everybody trying to use this for politics. Somebody put out this photo of Barack Obama supposedly feeding Hurricane Harvey survivors, and it went viral all over the net. Oh, former President Obama, he's out there being a wonderful thing. Turned out that was a hoax. The photo is from 2015. And complicating it is, of course, the fact that Obama is still acting like he's a president, and he's, sending his well wishes and his concerns and everything as if he's still there in the White House. Speaking of hoaxes, this just came on in from 12160.info. There are these two individuals, Claude Taylor and Louise Mensch, and they are Twitterers and internet writers. And they have a huge following among people who do not like Donald Trump. And these are the people who are putting out some of the most spectacular allegations against Donald Trump. And they're claiming that they were getting all of this information from a source who worked for the U.S. New York Attorney General, but they never double-checked it. And the sources' fake tips included a story that Trump's inactive fashion model agency is under investigation by New York authorities for sex trafficking. There was even a story they put out that Trump had already been replaced as president by Senator Orrin Hatch, but this was being kept secret from the American people. And it went on and on and on, and finally The Guardian approached Claude Taylor and Louise Mensch and said, we'd like to see a little more provenance about this source. And it turned out the source doesn't work for the New York Attorney's Office. It's a hoaxer. And he got away with it because he was telling these Trump haters what the Trump haters wanted to hear, and they said, oh, yes, and they ran with it. And it's just a reminder that there is a lot of fraud out there amongst the people who are trying to get rid of Trump any way they can. Is it true? Doesn't really matter. It's better if it's true, but we'll use it anyway. All right, moving on here. As you know, we're still dealing with all of this Antifa, Black Lives Matter, violence all over the country. And even the corporate media is finally having to acknowledge that the violence is, in fact, coming from their side, not from the conservatives who are trying to have these peaceful little protests. And I got to tell you something that was very laughable. I was looking at some of these Antifa marchers, and they're holding signs saying, after the purge, meaning of all of us useless white people, we will live in a worker's paradise. And I laugh at that for two reasons. First of all, they're talking about a Soviet-style system. And second, they don't seem to understand that if they get what they claim they want, they're all going to have to actually find jobs. So I find that a little ironic, deliciously so. But there is a concern. Is the goal of all of this violence a color revolution here in America? Are they that desperate to get rid of Donald Trump that they're going to stage a coup d'etat? We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today here. And the children are already trying to attack my web server again. You'd think they'd eventually give up. And they're probably being paid to do this. Jobs are hard to come by. Anyway, So we're talking about all this violence, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and is it we know that some of these people are being paid. We know that George Soros is funding both Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They're hiring people to show up at these protests and demonstrations. They're going through a public relations firm out in Los Angeles. And it does look like the beginnings of a color revolution here in America to overthrow Donald Trump and return the United States of America securely to the clutches of the narcocracy. And along the way, of course, everything that America is supposed to be, everything that we stand for, everything that makes us Americans is being destroyed. Now, Roger Stone has come out with some advice for Donald Trump about draining the swamp. And he's saying, basically, there's a reality. Most members of Congress are arrogant, and they are. I've met a few. And Roger Stone is saying that until a scalp is actually taken, they're going to continue to be defiant. Roger Stone is saying is that all Donald Trump needs to do is bring one incumbent down on whatever charges it takes, and everybody will get into line. And of course, the liberals are out there screaming that Roger Stone is guilty of cultural appropriation by using the word scalp. Now, Special Counsel Miller may in fact be starting to look in the right direction. They have now subpoenaed the Podesta Group over their interactions with Russia, which are demonstrable. And now the Podesta Group is trying to cover their rear ends by retroactively filing all of the disclosures they should have been filing with the Department of Justice all along. And they're going to take the position about, well, we didn't mean to do wrong, the Hillary defense. And here's the paperwork, and we're all caught up here. But apparently that was not sufficient for Mueller, who's starting to take a look at that. Now, on the other hand, we've had all these calls for a second special counsel to basically go back into Hillary's links with Russia, specifically the Uranium One deal and various other donations, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, that went into the Clinton Foundation from Russia. And so far, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is refusing to appoint one. And so we're looking at our second Attorney General in a row protecting Hillary. And again, not really protecting Hillary herself, but just aware that if the scale of what the Clintons and Bushes and the CIA have really been doing over the last 30 years ever got into the public eye, the credibility of the federal government would be gone. It would be down in negative numbers. If we can have negative interest rates, we can have negative credibility. And that's where the federal government is going. And again, they're doing it to themselves. As you know, there was this dossier about how Donald Trump was over in Russia and the prostitutes and all this other stuff that was going on, which was discredited. And so now the Washington Post is trying to revive that story, saying there may have been something there because of Donald Trump's efforts to build a hotel in Moscow in 2015. See, there's the connection between Trump and the Russian leadership. He wanted to build a hotel over there. How terrible is it going to be, Trump building a hotel? The problem is that Trump himself never went to Moscow as part of the proceedings. It was handled by subordinates, and the project never got off the ground because Russia refused to issue the permits. So it doesn't sound like there's any collusion if Trump didn't get, or Trump's people didn't get what they want. But the Washington Compost is out there trying to turn this into yet another reason that we should all agree that Donald Trump should be taken out of the Oval Office. And I'm going to say right now, for the record, all right, I am very disappointed in Donald Trump. And I absolutely will oppose any efforts to remove him from the office of President of the United States of America because he won that election. And that's the way the rules go. He overcame massive election fraud to do it. He is the elected President of the United States of America. And don't you dare try and steal that from him. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to this show. And I can't believe I'm seeing this all over the place here, where they're pushing this idea that God punished Texas for voting for Donald Trump. No, I mean, if you really want to go down that path, how about God is punishing America for waging unjustified war all across the globe? Because Hurricane Harvey's hardly the only thing we've had to deal with. We've had the San Onofre reactor meltdown, Hanford, WIP, the Gulf oil disaster, tornadoes. I think you're looking in the wrong direction there, people. Now, getting on back to the White House, I got to tell you, it's turning into a soap opera over there, really. Apparently, former White House Deputy Assistant Sebastian Gorka quit his job with the Trump administration last Friday, and he's not wasting any time making waves outside the Oval Office. Apparently went on Fox News and said that it's the Obama holdovers are doing all the leaking, which certainly makes a lot of sense. They are not loyal to Donald Trump, even though he is now the president. They are still loyal to Obama and the Democrats and the liberals. And again, Trump was dangerously naive coming into the White House, thinking that Washington, D.C. politics operates the same way that business does. And it doesn't. It's a completely different animal. And he's been caught totally off guard, just like Jimmy Carter. And Roger Stone is right. Trump has to go on the offensive. He's got to take off, the gloves. He's got to put on his presidential brass knuckles. Or he will be a one-term president. I mean, you've got Steve Bannon out there saying effectively the Trump presidency is over. He's been completely surrounded by this military junta. I'm a little more optimistic. I think if Trump were to get a burr under his saddle, to mix my metaphors, that he could clean out his own house. And he should have on day one. Should have just said to everybody, you're all fired. And I'm going to bring in all new people who are qualified to do the various jobs you are doing, and they're all going to be from outside Washington, D.C., outside the Beltway, so they're not coming in with all these secret little compromising connections and favors that they owe and blackmail information and so forth. Now, as you know, a lot of people are very disappointed that the class action lawsuit against Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Democratic National Committee for rigging the primaries for Hillary was thrown out of court by the judge, even though the judge admitted the rigging had taken place. But in the judge's mind, it's okay for the Democratic National Committee to decide for themselves who their candidate's going to be. And if that's the case, why even bother having primaries? Unless it's to swindle the voters into thinking they still have some kind of a choice. Well, the good news is there are new lawsuits forming on the horizon. People are not giving up. They do not want to live in a country where the party committee chooses the candidates. The way this country was set up originally is we, the people, form the parties, choose our candidates, run our candidates, vote for those who will hold the office. If we let our political parties choose our candidates, we're going to be in Soviet Union-style territory. Because that's how they used to do it in the USSR. The party would choose the candidates and put them on a ballot. So it didn't really matter who you voted for. You were going to get somebody who was going to go along with the party platform. That's not what America is supposed to be. Now, a lot of people are picking up on this comment made by Utah Representative Jason Chaffetz, basically saying that this scandal surrounding Imran Awan, Debbie Wasserman Schultz IT consultant, goes way beyond the bank fraud. And we're hearing more and more that there is an espionage aspect to this. And we're hearing more and more that there is pressure on Awan to cut a deal. But again, we know that there was a lot of good investigation going on regarding Hillary's email server, but it was always being stymied from the very top, from Loretta Lynch, from James Comey. And it looks like we've got the same thing going on now with Jeff Sessions. He should have appointed that special counsel for Hillary when asked by members of Congress. He has no legitimate reason not to. and a special counsel formed to look into Hillary Clinton's handling of classified documents, it's going to be a very short job and a very low budget, because former FBI Director James Comey admitted on TV that Hillary Clinton did commit felony violations of Title 18. Let's just go back and prosecute her for those. Why aren't we? And that's a question everybody ought to be calling up their local media and calling up their members of Congress and saying, James Comey, the former head of the FBI, said Hillary Clinton committed felony violations of Title 18. Why is she not being prosecuted? And they'll probably come back and say, well, Comey said she didn't mean well. And then you remind them, Title 18 does not require criminal intent. Negligence is also a felony violation. Intent is not required. And then shame them and say, it's obvious you have not read Title 18, isn't it? Well, we the people have. We know what the letter of the law is. So you tell me why we have this woman who has committed multiple felony violations of Title 18, exposed the nation's secrets to foreign espionage, and why she gets to walk away clear. You explain to us why that is the way things are supposed to be. And they'll hem and they'll haw and they'll shuffle their feet and they'll look for a reason to change the subject. Because, again, if I am right, Hillary Clinton was selling secrets to foreign interests and using her foundation to collect and launder the payments, based on the precedent set by the Clintons themselves back in 1994 with the Chinagate scandal. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call here. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha, Nui.
Oh, no darn, no snack bar. Okay, fine,
Okay.
be that way. Anyway.
Well, I don't want the Venice police shooting me, misunderstanding what I'm saying, and then shoot me.
Well, in that case, you're not in the boat by yourself then. But hey, they better make it worthwhile. Two quick things. One, when you mentioned about what Trump should have done to start with, as far as kicking everybody else and actually bringing someone in that's hasn't got tied this way and that way and whatever have you. If he was to have actually kicked everyone out and started from scratch, I would have had a lot more respect for him. Plain and simple. Because at least he was showing that he was trying to connect with the everyday person. Two, that being said, as far as the scenario of what's going on with people in Texas that are dealing with the flooding and all that from the hurricane storm, and people making the negative derogatory comments about that, my question is this. I'm not sure if I want to know what kind of religion they practice that the family values is that low grade that they would actually go and spout off like that. That is reprehensible. So that's just my sentiment.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. Anything?
That's
what?
I just find that deplorable.
I agree.
I mean, basically, when Joshua ben Joseph, otherwise known as Jesus, or whatever name you want to call him, was visiting here, he taught about loving each other as you do yourself. He taught love. He didn't teach war or hate or bloodlust or any of that kind of garbage.
You may have just discovered what's going wrong with all of these people. They hate themselves, and so they're going to take that hate and they're going to project it on everybody else.
That almost sounds narcissistic.
They're self-hating Americans.
I ain't going there. No wonder they got taken to synthetic drugs to try to chill the tails out.
Oh,
never
my
mind.
Goodness. All right. Later. Talk to you soon. Have a good day. All right, getting on back here. Now, getting on back to the subject of hoaxes. And they're still out there trying to play hoaxes. And I'm rather ashamed to say that this one came from our own Hawaii State Representative, Beth Fukumoto, who I've actually met and talked to down at the state capitol because I do get involved in some of the local issues here. Apparently, Beth is claiming that she received a letter last Wednesday that was just filled with hate from a Trump fan about boo-hoo, oh, your parents were in the internment camp, and yes, they were and everything. But unfortunately, once Huffington Post printed photos of the actual letter in the envelope, people started to notice something very, very odd. because apparently the stamps weren't canceled, and the barcode at the bottom of the envelope was an intelligent mail barcode used by commercial mailers, which would only make sense if the letter had originated from the representative's office. Now, the stamp on the envelope was a 10-cent commemorative stamp that was printed in 1975. So this letter never... There's so many things wrong with it. And then finally, the scanned zip code on the envelope is Honolulu, not Los Angeles, where the letter was supposed to originate. So we've got another hoax out here. Oh, those evil Trump people, they're just ganging up on us poor Democrats here. Beth, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Now, there's a very interesting article that came out of Russia Insider, and I think they've hit the nail on the head on an important aspect of what's going on. The article is headlined, Permanent Adolescence, the Epidemic That Will Destroy America. And they're basically taking the position that when you look at the American society and how it is behaving, the violence in the streets at Berkeley and the rest of it, it becomes very obvious that the vast majority of the population of the United States of America is suffering from an epidemic of arrested emotional development. And this particular psychiatric condition is characterized by a combination of addiction, greed, immaturity, fear, blame, shame, resentments, anger, confusion, and suffering. And that's what we're seeing on display on those videos. And apparently the vast majority of Americans are stuck in an adolescent stage exhibiting behavior that you would see in young teenagers. Lying, negative attitudes, disobedience and disrespect, drug and alcohol abuse, depression, and issues of just where their sexuality lies and which restrooms they should be using. And again, you have to ask, is this a result of so many of them being on these prescription antidepressants, along with confusing your thought processes and destroying your impulse control? Maybe they halt the brain's natural process of maturity. And I think that would be really kind of worthy of a research study. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, now then, getting on to the war zones. Apparently in Ukaribat pocket, ISIS defenses have collapsed. And the National Defense Force is moving in to liberate the area, and ISIS is running. And this town is the last remaining ISIS stronghold in the area north of the Homs-Palmyra Highway. And as soon as it's liberated, government forces will be able to focus on lifting the ISIS siege from Deir ez-Zor. Now, the Russian aerospace forces destroyed 26 more pieces of ISIS military equipment, including 4 battle tanks and 2 fortified strong points belonging to the terrorist group. So the Syrian war is winding to an end. It's not winding to the end that the United States wanted. And they're still desperate enough to just try something completely out of left field. More about that in a little bit. Meanwhile, the Syrian army is advancing to within 13 kilometers of Deir ez-Zor. I'm sorry, I misread that. They advanced 13 kilometers toward Deir ez-Zor. And ISIS is now moving heavy weapons to Deir ez-Zor to try and rebuff the attack on what is going to be their last stronghold in all of Syria. If they lose Deir ez-Zor, it's all over. But the shouting. Now, down in Iraq, the Iraqi forces are gaining control of Tal Afar, including reportedly already in control of most of the city center. So that's pushing back. Over in Nasrallah, Daesh has surrendered to Hezbollah, and they are all going to be getting out of Lebanon. So a lot of dramatic changes over there. Now, I'm sure there are still elements within the U.S. government like, John McCain, who are out there saying, let's just go on in. Let's just get Assad. Here's your rifle, John. Now, as you know, Iran is back near or at the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. And they're trying to make an issue of demanding Iran submit to inspections of non-nuclear military sites. And Iran is saying, this is a dream. You have access to all the sites that were listed on the original P5+1 deal for all the nuclear weapons, and the IAEA comes and goes. And they're able to just look at all that stuff whenever they want. And these other facilities are off limits because we're working on stuff there that we wish to keep secret. It's none of your business, and as long as it's not nuclear, it's none of your business. But Nikki Haley's up there saying, no, that's the spirit of the P5+1 deal, is that we can come in and look at anything. And by the way, if you remember the run-up to the war in Iraq, they were playing the same game there, demanding that Saddam Hussein let U.S. inspectors in everywhere, even into his own home. And Saddam kept yielding and saying, yes, okay, yes, okay, yes, okay, and it still did not stop the United States from coming on in and killing him. So Iran is basically saying we are in compliance with the P5+1 deal, and we will continue to be in compliance with the P5+1 deal, and you're just going to have to accept that. Now, amazingly enough, U.S. intelligence officials are reluctant to join Donald Trump's claim that Iran is in violation of the nuclear deal. And so you have these people like former CIA analyst Ned Price saying that, yeah, we've been down this road before. And so even within the government, there are people who are saying, we can't go on lying like this, because that's what it is. France has stood up and said they see no alternative to the Iran deal. They're not going to go with any other situation. They're certainly not going to join an invasion. We'll be right back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And again, we're talking about this run-up, this new attention being paid to Iran, and this idea that the U.S. is going to walk away from the P5+1 deal because Iran is not allowing the U.S. to just arbitrarily come on in and retroactively change the requirements, which is what the U.S. is trying to do. And again, Iran knows that the U.S. did this with Iraq. We have to look here, we have to look there, we have to look everywhere. And no matter what concession Saddam Hussein made, it didn't make a difference in the end. The U.S. invaded, bombed the country into rubble, and lynched Saddam Hussein, and never once found a weapon of mass destruction of any kind. So what we have here is this sudden interest on Iran all over again, and it's all for political gain. I mean, they certainly want Iran broken apart, so it is not an impediment to Israel's power projection over the Middle East. The Rothschilds want Iran under a private central bank, one of their private central banks, which Iran is not. And of course, Netanyahu needs a good war to hang on to power in Israel in the face of his arrest charge for corruption. So we heard last week that Israel and Saudi Arabia were talking about just hauling off and going into Syria unilaterally. And Israel is trying to build a case for it, saying that Iran is building military bases in Syria. Now, most experts doubt that an Iranian Air Force can handle a real deployment in Syria. And Iran does have some logistics bases, meaning storage yards, across the country. But they're far and away from building any kind of a military base that would represent a threat to Israel. And again, the reason Iran is so ill-prepared for that is it's not what they're into. Israel is threatening to just bomb Assad's presidential palace, go for a decapitation strike. And so Israel's out there acting very badly, talking about war, killing people and everything. Then Netanyahu has the chutzpah to turn around and whine to the visiting UN chief, Antonio Guterres, that the United Nations is treating Israel unfairly. You're not being fair to us. Now, Guterres is there to try and get peace talks going between Israel and Palestine. And Netanyahu is saying that the United Nations treats Israel unfairly with all these resolutions against Israel. And again, if Israel weren't behaving badly, there wouldn't be any resolutions. But in Netanyahu's mind, Israel is doing what Israel must. And the UN is just being so unfair to point it out. More when we come back from station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. So Israel is whining that the United Nations is being unfair, issuing all those resolutions. And of course, the reason for all the resolutions is that Israel continues to basically violate international law. And Netanyahu seems to feel it's unfair for the United Nations to not realize that Israel is above the law. And right now, as they talk about possible peace talks between Israel and Palestine, basically Netanyahu came on out and said that Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, is absurd when he denies that Jerusalem should belong to the Jews. And so basically, in Netanyahu's worldview, either you do everything he wants, or you're being unfair to Israel. You're an anti-Semite. You're a Jew hater. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Sean in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with the hurricane, because it kind of serves as a little lesson that people need to wake up, because we just... I still have empathy for them, but these people, in a day and age where there's TVs in everybody's house, and you got weather giving you such an advance warning that a big hurricane in a flood-prone area is coming at you, this is the kind of catastrophe that's going to happen if you sit there and wait and let the government tell you on what to do. With talks of an oncoming civil war and everything, if people act like this on a large scale across this country, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And the irony is the government wants you totally dependent on them and corporations, and yet when it all starts to come apart, you have to learn how not to be dependent on them, because that dependency is a form of slavery. That's why what King George III was trying to do to the American colonials, make them dependent on British companies for what they needed, make them dependent on the Bank of England for their currency, and the colonials just reached a point where they said no. They're trying to basically make the new world just like the old world, and there's a reason we left the old world.
Well, yeah, it's... Like I said, we're going to be in bad shape if people just need to wake up, and you got to understand you have to think a little bit for yourselves, because your survival may depend on it. As dangerous as it's getting here, I think that's what it's going to sadly come to.
Yeah, it could potentially be very, very ugly, but again, everybody listening to my broadcast here, you got to have some degree of preparedness, mostly focusing on foods that do not require refrigeration. Foods that are designed to be stored for long periods of time. The packaging is resistant to insects and rodents. One of the big mistakes that a lot of people just getting into prepping do is they think they can go on down to the store and get some bags of rice and pasta and everything and put them in the closet. And then all of a sudden they come back 6 months later and critters have gotten into that. So you have to get special heavy-duty containers for all that stuff, and you got to have water. Water is the most important.
Absolutely. That's all I got for you today, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Texas got a lot of water, Mike, but it's not drinkable. People... Yeah, he's absolutely right, but, the storm kind of pivoted, and it's hard to evacuate, the whole state. They're in some bad shape over there, Mike, and, good thing Joel Osteen needs to leave, I think, Texas, because that guy is like a fraud. Did you talk about Joel Osteen yet, Mike, with his church not opening yet, and finally they're opening, and after the damage has been done, because he's all nothing but like a snake oil salesman, like the Vitamin person,
Well, I hadn't gotten to it yet, but it's a good time to talk about it right now. And apparently this Olson has one of these really big television ministries, and he's got this gigantic church, which I think seats 15,000. And when the call...
20,000.
20,000, I stand corrected. When the call went out for facilities to open their doors to provide temporary shelter for people who had to leave their homes because of the hurricane, Olstein basically issued a statement saying that their church couldn't open. It was inaccessible because of all the flooding. And apparently people who were close enough to see that it was still actually above the floodwaters with serviceable roads got on social media, and everybody started basically attacking them. And finally, yes, they did announce that they're opening the doors and they're allowing the facility to be used as a temporary shelter.
But Mike, he could have been, if he really believed in what he believed in Noah, you know what I mean? Like, he should have had all those seats removed in the 20,000 stadium because it's the size of a football stadium, but he didn't because he don't want to get his rugs dirty. That's what the guy is, a scam. He's a motivational speaker that uses Jesus and God to get money to sell his books and his DVDs. And if people give him any money, you're morons. The guy is not helping you. He's hurting you because he should have been ready for this. We knew the storm was coming. So he should have been ready to house people, no matter if it's in Houston or in Galveston or the other areas, to have cots and other stuff. There was somebody who owns a furniture store with 2 stores that cleared out everything to put cots and stuff in. This guy's worth $50 million, $100 million a year he makes. What did he do for anybody? Nothing. Nothing. He's a piece of garbage, Mike. Like, these people need to be run out of Houston and bring in some people who help people. Religion or not, this guy's garbage, Mike. I mean, I think he's a fraud. I don't know what you think. I think he's a big fraud. He's a big talker, a car salesman.
Yes.
When you go to the car dealership, that's all he is. He's a piece of garbage.
Well, the thing about an event like Hurricane Harvey or a big quake or any natural disaster, you get to see the true character of everybody around you, your friends, your neighbors, your local politicians, your clergy, and you get to really see them as they really are. Because when times are good and everything's comfortable, everybody can put on a successful facade. When you're dealing with a huge amount of adversity, that's when you find out what people's characters are really like.
Mike, you're absolutely... You know what? Between him, this storm shows you who the real enemy is, and Trump shows you, / John McCain, Paul Ryan, who the enemy is, because I hate to tell people this, but there are bad people in this country and in the world, and these people are just don't give a crap about you.
Yeah.
Joel Osteen don't care about you. He didn't open his home to anybody. He didn't open his... Now he's opening his church with a couple air mattresses down like not in the main area, but down the hallway. He has 2 homes, a $10 million home and a $5 million home. Where is anything? These people don't care about you. They want to take the money, and thanks a lot, sucker. Thanks, Mike. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thanks a lot there. We're going to let you go, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go back to the phones. Alan in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, it's good to be able to hear you again. You all have been cut off from over here somehow or other for the last couple of days. In fact, I've even had to listen to that gravelly-throated fella, I'm talking about a couple of times. Well, in fact, David Knight has a decent program on there now and then, and I like to listen to him. But,
okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you. So do you listen to my show on the RBN live stream or over BAMuser?
Oh, I'm listening on a telephone, speakerphone.
Ah, okay. Okay, so you're using the Listen Live by phone, and that's not been working for the last few days.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad because you kept getting... the reason I ended up over on InfoWars is because when you dial Republic, you got all circuits are busy, and then it would say your carrier has misdirected your call. Call again later, and you always got the same, some kind of garbage. But anyway, that was the reason. I'm glad to know it had a rational explanation.
Well, no.
But anyway, again, I thought y'all might have all been arrested or something.
No, we haven't been arrested here. Yeah, I'm hearing from our control room this is a known issue. Apparently, they're saying that it's your provider is blocking the numbers. And just like we're seeing all the censorship all over the internet and YouTube and everything, now even the phone carriers are out there trying to protect the image of the government by getting in the way of the independent media and trying to cut us off. And at some point, we may be driven underground, and who knows? Maybe we'll go back to using shortwave.
Well, I also wanted to agree with one of the last callers that there might be a little bit of the chicken little skies falling population thought control in all this Harvey stuff. I know it's raining a lot.
Well,
but,
I mean,
anyway, they really are pumping for all it's worth, it looks like to me. But let me pose a question to you if you can. One which you may not prefer to answer, but Iran and Iraq, for example, you were just talking about.
Yeah.
It seems like that is into a lot of cynical manipulation, and I just wanted to throw out there to you, I'm on maybe my 12th plus reading of The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, William Shirer. One of the great complaints in that book, you may be familiar with it or not, but anyway, one of the great complaints in that book is Hitler's cynical manipulation of foreign policy, first against Austria, then against Czechoslovakia, and of course then against Poland. And of course, Poland was the precipitating factor of World War II, our great justification. But dang, Michael, it looks to me like the USA Today is engaged in exactly the same kind of cynical manipulation of foreign policy that we justified for going to war for.
You're absolutely.
What say ye?
You're correct. I agree with you.
Makes it even more frightening when you can't get through to your friends on the telephone too. Seems like the SS Waffen might be on the march here, just not wearing the same colors.
All right, well, listen, we're going to let you go here because this really is
okay, well, again, great. I'm good to hear from you. Be back in touch again.
All right, fine. Thank you very much for the phone call. Yeah, it's kind of a toss-up. We don't know if we're being deliberately interfered with or if it's just the nation's communications infrastructure is just that bad, where all the equipment is wearing out, it's not being repaired. Their attitude now is no more preventive maintenance. It costs too much money. We'll just wait things for fail, and then a week or two we'll fix it, and they'll just be happy to have the service back here. All right, we have one more caller waiting on the line. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you doing? I hope you're well.
Doing okay.
That's good. I was listening to one of my favorite call-ins, Dustin in New Jersey, and I have to wonder, why is it that people still believe in this nonsense when you have people like Jim Baker and who was that other one there that was crying on TV? Was it Roberts or something?
Yeah,
like
Reverend.
Yeah, I could see him crying. I mean, I used to watch this stuff when I was a kid with my brother just for laughs, like Ernest Ainsley and stuff like that.
Oh God, I remember in the early days. Yeah, there was it Jim and Tammy Baker? If you didn't donate so much money by the end of the month, God was going to take them to heaven or something. That was one of them. I remember.
Oh my goodness.
I remember in the early days when I was really starting to get into radio when I was in college, and there was this sort of interesting character called Brother Springer, who had an AM radio station way out in the Mojave Desert, and it was basically a one-man operation. He had his radio telephone license, and he lived in this little house trailer. And his bed was at one end, and the other end was his radio station, where he'd have the mixer and the microphone, and the transmitter was literally right against him, so he could turn around and adjust the dials and keep everything going. And he had a very powerful signal out there. And he was always out there preaching the gospel, but there's a problem with sitting next to those radio transmitters for a prolonged amount of time is you get cancer. And that's what happened to Brother Springer.
Well, that's kind of a shame, but, once again, Dustin phones in, and I know I could just tell by the way he was talking, it just eludes him how people can even believe this stuff, that these millionaires are actually peddling. Like he said, they're snake oil salesmen. And, I mean, the history is there. And it's just like, even the X-Files had an episode on this nonsense. It's just laughable. I used to laugh about it when I was a kid, and I laugh about it now because I can't believe that P.T. Barnum was actually right when he said there's a sucker born every minute. It's amazing.
Well,
thanks for having me.
You got it there. Thanks an awful lot. One of these days, when peace and prosperity has broken out over the globe and I can turn my attention to other things, I really ought to write a book one time, because there was a brief time in my early career, in fact, it was right after I was working at CBS Television City and I had my little run-in with CIA, and shortly thereafter I was let go from Television City. Gee, I wonder if there was any connection with that. And I worked briefly for, believe it or not, a Christian broadcasting television station. And back then I was still agnostic. So I wasn't really sure what was going on. But the hijinks that were going on inside that TV station, oh, man, you could make a movie out of. And so, anyway, we have another caller waiting on the line. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. About Joel Osteen and Lakewood Church. His last name's Osteen, O-S-T-E-E-N.
Yes.
But anyway, just first of all, I'll accost him with the obvious, just briefly. 2 verses from the Epistle of James, chapter 2, verses 15 and 16. If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? So there it is. James is known as, pretty much a works-oriented epistle. There's often, a lot of people think that James and Paul were sort of in contrast in that regard, or in conflict, but not necessarily. Anyway, the point is, there it is pretty obviously, if somebody needs something and you don't give it, what is the profit? Now, having said that, I would point out that they kind of ducked the bullet in the sense that the buildings and the facilities didn't get flooded. And undoubtedly, it may not be just Osteen's call. He might have to answer to a board or something like that, of elders or what have you. But they remember what happened, what fate befell the New Orleans Superdome.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure they had images dancing in their heads of their facility ending up looking like that, and incurring liabilities even, or people died in the Superdome. People were raped in the Superdome. The facilities were destroyed. People were going to the bathroom all over the place. It took a good long time to get that thing rehabilitated, and the people in charge of that had access to a lot more money than Osteen does, even though he's got quite a bit. So I kind of, on one hand, I'll give him a little bit of a slide on the hesitancy. However, it did seem fairly obvious that if you're so faithful, that's when you trust God and give, and trust God to give back in the long run.
Well, again, yes, you're absolutely right. The pastor of any church answers to a church steering committee. There are issues of insurance and liability, and that may have been what he was thinking, but ultimately the public backlash was there. When you're dealing with a natural disaster, and it's been declared a disaster, that kind of loosens up a lot of the issues where, it's not like you made a choice to expose somebody to a dangerous situation. You were trying to get them out of a dangerous situation. And I'm sure the lawyers would have a lot of fun with it in court. So anyway, at least that situation right now is resolved. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Glenn, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently they've got a lot of the victims of Harvey in the Houston Convention Center. They got about 9,000 people in there. And I remember from when I was down in Houston working at the MSC, I remember seeing these absolutely huge shopping malls that just overshadowed anything that we had in Southern California. I remember there was one that was the Galleria, a just gigantic facility. And so there's places that people can go. And yeah, when you go through an event like this is when you find out the true character of everybody that you know here. All right, let's get on back to the international news and Netanyahu, who's out there whining and crying, and you're not being fair by not giving me everything that I want, so forth and so on. The reality is that Netanyahu right now faces arrest if he sets foot in Spain. And this goes back to Israel's attack on the Gaza Freedom Flotilla in 2010. Spain's national court issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu, for Ehud Barak, Avigdor Lieberman, Moshe Yaalon, Eli Yashai, and Vice Admiral Maron Eliezer. They are all subject to immediate arrest if they ever set foot in Spain. But of course, Netanyahu says it's unfair if you mention that. Now, this is a very alarming story. Over the last several months, we've been hearing about all these training exercises, and we're sending troops into the Baltic areas, and it's just a training mission, it's a training exercise, and, you know, it's nothing really to worry about. And then all of a sudden, NATO basically announces that they have 4 multinational battle groups fully operational in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. They're now a fact on the ground. They're being described as defensive and proportionate deterrent force. In other words, no, it was not about training. They were just trying to get all these troops and weapons into place, and now they have these battle groups, these 4 battle groups, right along Russia's border. Meanwhile, on the other side, Russia's having exercises with Belarus, and everybody's screaming, oh, it's a provocation, it's proof that Russia's the aggressor. No, if Russia was holding exercises on the northern side of our Canadian border, then it would be reasonable for us to be worried. But remember, all of our people are on the other side of the planet on Russia's borders. We know who the aggressor really is here. Now, down in Myanmar, apparently the army continues to battle the Rohingya insurgents, and a lot of people are fleeing, women and children mostly. And apparently this was all triggered by coordinated attacks on Friday by insurgents wielding sticks, knives, and crude bombs on 30 police posts and an army base. So far, 104 people are dead, and a large number of people, Buddhist civilians and Muslim Rohingya, are fleeing the northern part of the Rakhine state. So another war is cranking up over there as well. Remember Rodney King, that famous quote, can't we all just get along? It was a legitimate question. A lot of people poked fun at him because he was very nervous on the camera and everything, but it was a great question. Why can't we all just get along? If it weren't for our political leadership, I think we would get along. Ordinary people left to themselves pretty much tend to just want to take care of their families, do business. It's the rulers who see conflict and discord and chaos as tools of their rise to power that are always going to just kick things off. Now, over in Cambodia, their government has exposed yet another U.S. covert network attempting to interfere in the nation's internal political process. This one was the United States National Democratic Institute, and the government of Cambodia has ordered them to cease all activities and for the foreign staff to remove home. See, everybody's now on to what the government's been doing. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I'm still getting used to this new mixer. We're going to go right back to the phones here. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me, Mike?
I hear you just fine.
Okay. Hey, could it be that God is just punishing Texas and Houston for overcharging for gas?
Well, whatever, everybody's out there with their own pet theory. It's human-caused global warming. It's chemtrails. It's the revenge of...
you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you think about it, Texas has inflicted a lot of pain on the country. Whether it's the IRS auditing you, that's the headquarters that killed Kennedy down there. Department of Education is down there. You got the Department of Treasury down there. I mean, everybody that was in charge of the Waco scene, during Waco, everybody in the government was from Waco, whether it was the head of the IRS, which was Benson, or the head of the ATF.
Yeah.
Everybody that was involved in the government was from Waco. Texas has inflicted a lot of pain on the country. I'm just wondering if God is punishing them, and it's too bad that other innocent people that have just moved there have to suffer. But we got this rich oil country down there.
All I can say is, if God is punishing, if God is going to start punishing states for inflicting harm on the rest of the country, then California better look out.
Yeah, well, everybody's in line, but Texas is look at all these fake preachers that have come out of there over the years. I like Jimmy Swaggart. He had a lot of talent. I enjoyed watching him. But all these people just keep falling for these Texas preachers, and it's actually comical, but it'd be funny if it weren't true. Okay, that's all I got, Mike. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Terry in Oregon. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm calling on the phone and listening on the phone. You hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Okay, good. I'm wondering what this is all about, this bombing raid on the Sudan by Israel. It was a little bitty paragraph, that 99% of the people are just going to gloss over and not know about. But you take any other country like Syria or North Korea or Russia, if they did something like that, it'd be like full headlines. We got to go to war.
Absolutely. The corporate media is always going to cover for whatever Israel is doing. We know that. We've seen it for a great many years. Again, we ourselves in the United States of America are under puppet rulers, and our true rulers are over there in Tel Aviv. And I don't like it. I'm sure most people don't like it. When exactly did this bombing take place?
I thought I read it on the computer this morning. I could have been mistaken. Maybe I was...
No, I just found it. Apparently, Israel bombed the Yarmouk factory in Sudan. And you're right. It's getting hardly any attention anywhere at all.
What are they trying to do? Are they trying to change regimes, or is it evidently the North Sudan, not the South? But I got no idea what's going on.
I would say, we know one thing that Netanyahu is trying to do is get Israel into some kind of a war, because he's convinced that if there is a war going on, that even if he's convicted for his corruption charges, the Israeli people will not want to change leaders. And more than a few leaders throughout history have held on to power by keeping their countries in a constant state of war, or at least a war conveniently when elections are being run.
Well, this is a violation of international law to go into another country and bomb them without a UN resolution.
Yeah, but Israel does it all the time, and for that matter, more and more so does the United States.
Right, and we shouldn't accept it. We gotta point all stuff out and scream about it. That's about it, Mike. And by the way, it was Oral Roberts that said God was going to take him and didn't come up with $23 million by a certain date.
Okay. Well, I don't.
He's the same guy who used to do these healings, but after he built his hospital, he didn't do those anymore. He wants you to check in his hospital. And the guy that cried on TV was Jimmy Swaggart.
That's right.
Because they caught him with a hooker. And then they caught him again after he cried on TV. So, anyways, thanks. Good talking to you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to take another phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, I've been thinking, all these military adventures and misadventures and getting into people's faces like we're doing right now on Russia's border, and messing around with this guy in North Korea and all the other garbage we do in, of course, Afghanistan. If we spend that, if we brought our troops home and spend that money on building proper dikes and fixing up dams in low-lying areas like Houston, New Orleans, and all along, actually, pretty much all along the Atlantic coast, we wouldn't have the horror that's going on right now in Houston. What is it with this country, man? What is it with these? We need to get rid of this leadership and need to get some kind of peace candidate that's going to concentrate in this country.
Well, we had a peace candidate, and we elected a peace president, and very obviously, the Pentagon is now basically in control of the country, and the Pentagon loves wars.
I get the feeling that Trump is just either weak or just not up to the job. He just doesn't understand what's going on. I think if we would have elected a guy like Rand Paul, this wouldn't be happening. He would be standing up to these guys. He would not let this happen. The same thing even as Cynthia McKinney. I don't think she would be letting this happen. Okay, whether it's the Zionist lobby or the neocons themselves, and whoever else, and the globalists, and even the generals themselves. Somebody needs to stand up to these people and tell them, no, we're not going to do this. Plain and simple. We're tired of these wars. We're tired of these military adventures. This country is falling apart, even right now, with Houston maybe disappearing as a city. Right now, they're still worried about this idiot in North Korea, who's just probably acting out of fear himself. It just keeps on, and we're still going to send more troops in Afghanistan and keep wasting money. Like you said, they still got these soldiers along the borders in Europe, in Eastern Europe. It just makes no sense, and people just don't seem aware. Well, one of the reasons is like you see with some of these big corporations like Google and YouTube and and Facebook, how they're trying to squelch opposition opinions.
Yes.
And I'll tell you another thing too. What Trump can do about that, he can start antitrust actions against these companies, start breaking them up. But he's not doing it. He's just sitting there and letting them do this to him and to do this to us. He's doing it to the country. They're not really doing it to him. They're doing it to us.
Yes.
This is not what we voted for.
No, it isn't. And I think a lot of people, certainly the liberals, are out there screaming that, see, you should have voted for Hillary. But Hillary, Donald Trump is very reluctant to go down this path. Hillary would have been leading the pack. Would have been out there.
Oh, she would have been worse.
Yeah, she would have been far, far worse. There's no question about it. However they co-opted him, we don't know. We know that his own advisors are lying to him. We know that the CIA lied to him about having absolute evidence that Assad gassed the people at Idlib. We know that was a lie. We know that the White House Chief of Staff is ruling with an iron fist as to what information the president gets or does not get. And so, they've succeeded in enveloping him, and they're controlling him. They're creating a matrix illusion for him where everything presented to him is saying the only possible choice he has is to go on out and do what they want him to do. And wouldn't be the first time in history that a president or a ruler was literally being bamboozled by his own counselors and led in a direction contrary to the best interests of the general population.
He should have had some idea what he was letting into his cat when he gets a guy like McMaster, or when he lets his son-in-law there, this what's his name?
Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner, or some of these other people. He should have known better. I mean, and then he lets go of his best people. He lets go of Bannon. Before that, he let go of General Flynn. Now I don't know how good the other guy is, Sebastian Gorka, but, certainly Bannon was a good man, and he let him go. It just makes no sense. I mean, and people got to get wise to this. And we got to start looking. If we last long and up to 2020, we got to start looking to somebody like a Cynthia McKinney. I wish you'd have.
No, wait a minute. You've missed the lesson of the last election. Okay, whoever we elect, Cynthia McKinney, Ron Paul, whatever. Okay, the system, the establishment, the deep state is going to co-opt the presidency. They did it for Trump. I don't think Trump came into the White House intending to abandon his own base and say, yeah, we're going to start making wars all over the globe. He is being bamboozled by his own advisors and told that this is the only possible chance that we have. They may be telling him that North Korea really is able and willing to nuke the United States, and that's why they have to go on in there. So if they are doing it to Trump, they'll do it to a Cynthia McKinney. They'll do it to a Ron Paul. I mean, Obama campaigned on ending the wars. That never happened either. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but at this point, I don't think it's going to matter who we vote for president in 2020, because very clearly we've devolved into a military dictatorship. And just like the judge in Florida is saying that the Democratic Party has a right to choose the candidates and ignore the will of the people in the primaries, it just tells us the primaries and indeed the election process as a whole is just a theater presentation to convince us we're still in some form a constitutional republic with democratically elected leaders, and we're not. It's just that, as George Carlin used to say, it's a big club, we're not in it. The reason Donald Trump scared them was because for one moment they lost control over the process. He wasn't supposed to win. He wasn't even supposed to be in the running. And the American people overwhelmingly voted him in, and now they're really scared because it shows their system isn't invulnerable. If every single American gets up and starts saying, we demand this, that, and the other, they're going to have to adapt to that. They don't like doing it. That's why we're hearing all this talk now about shutting down the independent media and getting dissent under control.
Well, you know, I think they're asking for it when they try to do that. I think they're asking for, you know, I think the American people are just laying back, and sooner or later, they think they got to worry about Antifa. Antifa is the one that's got to worry. Once you really get the middle America really riled up, and the people really start to rebel, that's where your guns are. That's where the people who know how to shoot are. That's where the hunters, hunters who know how to stalk game. They also would know how to stalk a human being. That's where, and there's a lot of veterans out there. That's where they need to start worrying about, because they keep it up. That's what they're going to trigger off. We're not 1917 Russia. We're not going to let these, I don't know what you call them, Bolshevik, globalist, Trotskyites, because the Trotskyites are now on both the left and the neocons are really Trotskyites also, really. Mm-hmm. It's hard to explain, but I saw something yesterday on YouTube that I think, I don't have time to go into that with you, but it's pretty good. It's a pretty good documentary on Trotsky, and you could see where the neocons are actually very close to him also. And that's what people, they're not going to do it. They're not going to be able to do what they did in Russia in 1917. And they better start understanding that, unless, I don't know, unless they unleash their robots on us, if they have those kind of robots. Other than that,
they're close to it. They're close to it. All right, well, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, get back onto the current news here. And interestingly enough, there's a story that's just now breaking out of the Washington Times. Apparently, the FBI has decided that they're not going to release the rest of Hillary Clinton's emails in response to a Freedom of Information Act. And apparently the FBI's excuse is that the American people just aren't interested in Hillary Clinton's emails, and so therefore they're going to refuse the open records request. So again, there's something about that email server and what she was doing with it that is becoming the most protected point of all these overlapping scandals. All right, before we go back to the phone calls, I want to get through a couple of stories here about North Korea, because as you know, North Korea fired off a long-range missile. It flew over Hokkaido Island, and they're making a big deal about, oh, they were shooting at Japan. No, they shot over Japan, way over it. Japan still turned on the sirens and got all their people rattled about, oh, my goodness, North Korea is shooting at us. But look at a map of that part of the world. From North Korea's point of view, the Japanese island chain covers almost 1/3 of the horizon, And much of the rest of the horizon is in other people's countries. So it's not like North Korea had a lot of choices. Everybody's acting like this is the latest in a long line of provocations. Donald Trump is once again tweeting, all options are on the table. Now, interestingly enough, there's a theory going around why Kim Jong-un is continuing to test these missiles and to test longer and longer range missiles. He's trying to reach a point where he can convince the United States government that, yes, indeed, they can get a rocket onto a major U.S. city on the mainland, and yes, indeed, it may be carrying either a nuclear or biological weapon. Because Kim Jong-un is probably taking the position that the United States is not going to try and invade and attack North Korea at the risk of losing a major U.S. city. And that is exactly what nuclear deterrence is all about, making the cost of invading a country exceed its benefit. So that may be why Kim Jong-un is putting pedal to the metal, because North Korea doesn't have a lot of money to put into rockets and nuclear weapons. But they're feeling like they're in a corner. Let's go back to the phones here. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I just wanted to make a comment and get your thoughts. I think a lot of times what bothers me and a lot of other people is we always say they, we don't identify the enemy. And they is very broad. I mean, is it banksters? Is it Zionists, the neocons? Is it, there's got to be a better way to identify, like, Sun Tzu said, know your enemy. We don't, when we say they, it's just like, who is they? You know what I'm saying?
Well, they is the deep state. They are those who run this country for their own benefit, whether that's the military-industrial complex or the medical-industrial complex. And you're right, we should be a little bit clearer. But I think in general usage, they means, in general, the Wall Street, Washington, D.C. Axis of power. I think that's a good definition of who they are. Okay? We got to take a break for commercials.
All right.
Do you have more? Do you want to stay over? Nope, guess not. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And obviously on the corporate media, Harvey continues to be the major story, as well as it should be. And apparently they're starting to get more and more people just showing up, volunteers, airboats, rescuing people. Now they're rescuing pets. And somebody's trying to set up a system where people can identify their pets and reclaim them, because apparently not all of these animals have got the appropriate little tag about, I belong to these people over here. So getting on back to the situation with North Korea, everybody has seized this latest launch of a test missile. And emphasis again, test. They're testing, they're testing, they're testing. And the U.S. tests all the time. But it's okay for us because we're the good guys and North Korea are the bad guys. So the South Korean Air Force started carrying out major shelling drills, or bombing drills actually, with the use of the U.S. Mark 84 general purpose bombs. Now these are practice versions of it. They don't really explode. They weigh about a ton, and they're dumb iron bombs. They're just launched using the bomb sights on the aircraft itself, just like the good old days in World War II. South Korea is responding to the North Korean missile launch with an overwhelming show of force that are rattling all of their sabers. And apparently they're ordering a large military drill using F-15 fighter jets dropping bombs in an exercise that took place near Taebaek, a South Korean town near the 38th parallel. They wanted to make sure they were being seen. This is the Korean version of thumping one's chest. Interestingly enough, Russia has ordered the evacuation of much of Vladivostok up on north of the peninsula. Apparently, Russia is concerned that the U.S. might, in fact, go ahead and start hostilities against North Korea in the next few days. And Vladivostok is close enough where an errant missile or bomb could actually start hitting people. Adding fuel to the fire, the United States has just held their second test of the B-61-12 nuclear gravity bomb. And again, there's no actual warhead. This is a aerodynamically identical practice bomb, but they're practicing being able to put it onto the target because it is an unguided bomb. And the Pentagon is celebrating because all of a sudden they're getting to test all these weapons where there had previously been a moratorium, because the testing of weapons is often seen as a belligerent activity by foreign governments. Now, unfortunately, with the B-6112, it's a very tiny nuclear weapon, and it's only marginally more powerful than the largest of the fuel-air explosive bombs, which are the most powerful non-nuclear explosives in the U.S. arsenal. And military experts are out there saying that this bomb is going to be more ethical and more usable because it has greater accuracy and results in less catastrophic effects for civilians if used on vast areas. Now, the Russians are coming on back, and some of the people in NATO are coming on back, saying the fact is that this bomb is such a minor step forward from a non-nuclear weapon that it actually eases the transition for a war to go nuclear. And that is something we need to keep an eye on. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to get into the economic news here. Now, as you know, Amazon just bought the Whole Foods grocery chain, and they have already slashed prices by roughly half. And everybody's going huzzah, huzzah. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that it is not expected Amazon will keep the Whole Foods commitment to organic, natural, additive-free, chemical-free food, GMO-free, for example. That remains to be seen. Because obviously, if Amazon is slashing the prices, then they're basically going to the same kind of food you would get at any other supermarket. But this has had a major shakeup in the supermarket industry. And apparently, Albertsons was getting ready to do an IPO, and that's now been crushed by Amazon Whole Foods' entry into the supermarket meltdown price war. And already store traffic is spiraling down at Albertsons and Safeway. And again, we're going to see a price war, and that's going to be good for the American consumer. They're actually building from the ground up an Amazon Whole Foods at the bottom of the hill, and as soon as it's complete and open, we'll go on in and we'll report back to you what we're finding. But it's certainly going to be a lot more convenient, because prior to Amazon, we loved to go to Whole Foods, but the only one that we had before was way, way, way on out past the university, and with our car and the condition it's in, we just didn't feel like it was worth taking the risk to drive all that way and back, along with all the crazy local drivers that we have here. Now, as you know, various governments, banks are concerned about cryptocurrencies, about their potential for misuse. And so now there are new regulations being proposed where you will have to declare your cryptocurrency holdings if they exceed $10,000. The government wants to know where all those crypto whatevers are being stored here. Meanwhile, Bitcoin has hit a record high $4,600, and I can smell tulips in the air. Gold has surged 2.6% following the Jackson Hole meeting and the North Korean missile launch. And in fact, the North Korean missile launch rattled the Asian markets. Everybody's kind of upset. People are once again scrambling to find safe haven investments. Where can they put their wealth where it will be protected in the event of war? And again, precious metals under your own physical control. You cannot trust the paper brokerages. You cannot even trust the bank and the safe deposit vault, because the laws have been changed to allow the banks to go into your savings account and into your safety deposit box if the bank gets into trouble. So you need to buy silver, gold in small amounts so there's not a record. One of the best ways that you can do that is keeping an eye on the current spot price of the silver. Is what is called the junk silver out on eBay. These are the pre-1964 U.S. coins that have actual silver in them. And the advantage of these is it's a very inexpensive, anonymous way to get into investing in silver. And following the collapse of the Federal Reserve note, these pre-1964 coins are a recognizable unit of value. There won't need to be any conversions back and forth to figure out what these things are worth. They'll simply say, gallon of gas, 25 cents, which is what it was when I was a kid. But back then we were using the coins with the silver in it. So, now, Hurricane Harvey has created a bit of a dilemma for the illegal immigrants in Texas. Do they stay where they are and risk drowning or hypothermia? Or do they seek help, at which point they risk being discovered as illegal immigrants and being deported across the border? And part of the problem is that last Friday, there was a new law that went into effect that allows police in Texas to ask people for their immigration status. Well, look at it this way. If you hadn't snuck across the border in the first place, you wouldn't have wound up in a hurricane. I remember many, many years ago, this would have been in the 80s, and I was working for a company called Robert Abel and Associates, and they sent me out to do a presentation in Houston, as a matter of fact. And we were coming into the airport there, and we were literally racing the arrival of a hurricane. And that was one of the roughest landings I've ever had. They just slammed that plane onto that runway and popped up the spoilers. Didn't want to take the chance of being blown back up in the sky. Getting on over to Europe and the migrant situation, apparently migrant traffickers are bragging about how easy it is to bribe the British-backed Libyan Coast Guard. And apparently there is collusion between the Coast Guard and the smugglers. This according to Russia Today. Now, British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson vowed last Thursday to help solve the myriad cases blighting the North African state, unveiling an $11.6 million package of aid on a visit to Tripoli. Somehow, I don't think that aid is actually going to fix the problem. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, we talked about this next story earlier last week, and apparently they are seriously considering doing this. A group of researchers from Germany and the United States have published a study which concludes that doping xenophobic populations with massive quantities of the estrogen-linked hormone oxytocin will cure nationalism. Now, oxytocin is the hormone that is excreted by babies that just make you want to love and hug and hold them. There's literally a chemical messenger saying, this is a baby, you will love it and take care of it. And so now you have these globalists who want to cure us of our nationalism and our xenophobia from all these migrants coming on in and raping and murdering people by dosing us with this oxytocin. In other words, they're going to literally carry out a biological war against people to get them to accept the refugees flowing into their countries for all the free handouts and everything. I think this is absolutely appalling that they're willing to use chemical warfare on us in order to change our brains to go along with their agenda. Talk about the ultimate insult to your personal dignity and your freedom. I think it's a very dangerous precedent. And again, science fiction writers have talked about this many times before, the dystopian culture, where you are simply drugged into whatever state the government seems to feel would be best for them right now. Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. Everybody is on permanent tranquilizers. They're called Soma. And what was the other one I was thinking of? Well, it doesn't really matter. It's a common theme throughout a lot of science fiction stories where people are being forcibly drugged by their government to change their thinking, to change their mind. It was a feature in THX 1138. Got to take your medicine, got to take your pills, got to get your brain where it best serves the government here. Now then, do you remember a way back, let's see, there was this Amsterdam situation where this guy rammed a car through the crowd and wounded 8 people, and the police were saying, we don't know who it was, we don't know where they went. It turned out somebody had a photo, and it turned out the photo allowed them to identify the driver of the car as Khalid Karmawi, and yes, he is a migrant, and apparently the police knew that all along. Martin Van Dun, he's a Dutch reporter for the local Amsterdam newspaper Het Parool, came on out Twitter saying the man's name had been known to journalists for a long time, but the newspaper decided that origin and background of the perpetrator are never news, and the same holds this time. In other words, they're going along with this dictum that when these migrants and refugees commit acts of violent crime, that's not going to be put out there in the public. The public don't need to know, because it gets in the way of just accepting the new world order, everybody being blended together. This next story, I think, is really kind of sick. This is over in Natural News. And apparently, in the latest example of political correctness gone absolute bat-poo crazy, a member of Britain's Labour Party by the name of Naz Shah came on out and said that girls who have been victims of Muslim rape gangs need to shut their mouths in the spirit of diversity. So here you have a British Labour Party politician who's obviously on board with the New World Order, saying that girls who are being gang raped by these Muslim gangs ought to shut up in the name of diversity. If you complain about being raped and assaulted, then obviously you are being racist. I mean, it's absurd. But apparently, according to some of these extreme leftists, even sexual assault is to be ignored if it gets in the way of the advancement of their agenda. Quite a contrast back in the 1990s when the same leftists were out there saying that there was a rape epidemic, and even if you accused the wrong man, it would still be a good thing for him. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I was watching your program for the umpteenth time, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars.
Yes.
And what I don't understand is when they tried to kill Andrew Jackson, did they look at that as a conspiracy? Was it further investigated, or the whole issue just dropped?
Well, Jackson himself said that he thought the Rothschilds were behind it. And what you need to do is, as good as that video is, you need to go to my website, and on the main page up at the top, in that gray box underneath where you see my picture, the second story in on the list is the text, an image version of the article from which the video was made, and there's a lot more information in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Yes, you've got it. Andrew Jackson was convinced that the Rothschilds were behind the attempt on his life because basically the Rothschilds were the ones pushing for the continuance of the Second Bank of the United States of America. The Rothschilds have been running this scam on the human race for 300 years, and it has made them insanely wealthy. They're so rich, nobody even bothers including them on the lists of the world's richest people. Now, over in Spain, Catalonia is vowing to move forward with their independence referendum, even though the Prime Minister is opposed to it. And everyone is saying Spain could be on the brink of collapse from this. The EU is falling apart. And I think it should. Yes, I'm a nationalist. I want my country to do well. I don't want to spend my time and energy worrying about other people's countries. But the New World Order wants to erase that. Now they're talking about ending a sense of nationalism by chemical warfare. Over in Cologne, Germany, apparently concerned about the rising violence from their refugee problem, the German city, the government is putting up heavy stone blocks around its famous cathedral. And what they want to do is basically they're setting up these large concrete blocks to be dragon's teeth, which is the military term for anti-tank defenses, these large spikes that tanks can't get over or trucks can't drive through. And these stone blocks weigh several hundred kilograms each, and apparently a lot of them are actually left over from the original construction of the cathedral itself. They were just stored nearby and never touched since then. But they are very much concerned about that. Germany is also carrying out an investigation over threats to kill left-wing leaders over this failed refugee policy. So the German people have had it. They're fed up with it. And everywhere that Merkel goes and says, I would do it again, she's booed off the stage. Okay, let's take another phone call. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike.
Aloha.
Yeah, I want to say about, thank you, about how we should feel about others and how we shouldn't shun their ways and everything. All I know is I love what I know. I feel comfortable around what I know. My mother's from England. My father's from Mississippi. These things I love, the South and England, and it's always going to be that way. I eat what I know. I dress as I'm used to dressing. And I have nothing against what others know and feel comfortable around. But it's not my way, and I love what I know and what is my roots. And I don't think telling us here in Texas how we should feel about others and how doing things that we like the way we like to do them is somehow shunning others. I don't think it's going to go over very well. I really don't.
Well, again, part of this idea, we've got this arrogant attitude that has, where we, as we are right now here today, are allowed to judge other people from different places, different cultures, even different times, based on our standards today, from which you get this idea that you know, what Thomas Jefferson and George Washington did way back when is evil because it would have been evil today, owning slaves. But it's kind of a cultural chauvinism on our part. And the other part of it, though, when you talk about people coming on into a country and assimilating, as Teddy Roosevelt suggested, that isn't so much about culture as it is about practicality, because people can have whatever culture they want to live in their own home. But when you go on out to a society, you have to interact with them, you have to communicate with them, you have to work with them, you have to engage in commerce on them. So it's a very fine line out there. But I do think this idea of somebody coming in from another country to our country and then demanding that we change our society to adapt to them, yeah. I don't think that's realistic at all.
Yeah, there was a thing that everyone was talking about a while back about what is socially acceptable, and it's not okay to harass others and things like that. And it's not okay. It's just like treat others the way you want to be treated. You know, that's a moral thing. We're not going to do that, but that doesn't mean we want to, you know, take on the ways of others and have to. I don't know, like what you were just saying it just right. What is socially acceptable, we want to stick to that. But we can't do other than what we feel in our hearts. And it's just, yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm not going to change how I feel. And I know what I like and I'm comfortable around, but it doesn't mean that we can't respect other people. That's what I'm saying. You want to be respectful. It's not okay to be a bully, for instance.
Yeah, but that's a two-way street here. I mean, I respect other people's cultures. In many cases, I admire their cultures to the point where they're going to start screaming, oh, you're appropriating our culture, which is not what's really going on. The problem is that you have way too many people running around saying, I demand you respect my culture, but I have no respect for yours. And that is...
How do we not respect their culture? You know, how do we not respect it? I don't get how we're not respecting, because we're not acting the way they want us to act.
Well, I think part of the issue is that a lot of people are reacting very negatively to how people from different cultures are behaving in public in our country.
Well, we have a right to, in some way.
Yeah, that's exactly the point here.
Socially acceptable, you know.
Yeah.
What is socially acceptable to our norms? We're gonna we might voice
Now,
our opinion on that one.
If you come here from another country, inside your own home, feel free to speak your native language, dress in your native clothing and everything, and carry out whatever rituals you care to. But when you come out and blend with the rest of the population, remember, the rules that apply are the ones that were here when you arrived. And that basically is it. Sherry, got to let you go.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sherry, got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, one of the reasons people in Europe are fed up with the European Union is that as it grabs more and more power and authority to itself, they try and justify their existence and their power and authority by interfering more and more with the operations of the European Union. There are some very almost ridiculous laws regarding food sold in the supermarkets, that certain types of product, like, for example, cucumbers, all have to be thus and thus in size so that nobody's being cheated by them. And as a result, there's a lot of food wastage there from food that didn't grow itself in accordance with the EU dictates. Now, another one that has got a lot of people upset is that as the migrant population pours into Europe, it is placing a strain on their electrical power generation. And rather than improve the electric infrastructure, the EU is now starting to impose limits on how much power your appliances can use. And the latest one that's going on out there is that the EU is going to strike down or limit how powerful your vacuum cleaner can be. And as a result, this has already started a stampede of people buying the current vacuum cleaners because they'll be allowed to be grandfathered in. But once this law goes into effect, you're going to have vacuum cleaners that draw much less electricity and consequently aren't really all that efficient at getting the dirt out of your carpets. And so a lot of people are looking at this and realizing this was not an effective way to deal with the problem, that the EU itself with its open borders policies has created this problem, this overuse of the electric infrastructure, the strain on the social services, all of it is coming out of this open borders policy. And people are really getting fed up with it, which is, again, why we set up in Germany. Apparently, they're investigating a very real possibility of assassination of left-wing leaders over all of this open borders nonsense. Now, as you know, it is expected that Donald Trump, or actually he already has, Donald Trump has decided to reverse a ban on allowing regular police units access to surplus military gear from the battlefields. And Ron Paul is denouncing it, saying this is basically subsidizing the militarization of our police departments, and they're already out of control. Whether it's the prescription antidepressants that so many of them are on, or it's the brainwashing from these Israeli security companies. But we recognize that the domestic police force has become a major problem. Under the civil forfeiture laws, they're stealing more from the American people than all the muggers and burglars and robbers put together. And because of, again, either the brainwashing from the security training companies or the prescription antidepressants, they're killing more innocent Americans than all the mass shooters and terrorists put together. And so we have this dangerously unstable group of people, and Donald Trump wants to give them grenade launchers. I think there might be a problem with that, or tanks, or armored vehicles. It's really insane out there. Apparently, Michael Moore is delighted that white men are dying out because he thinks America's demographic shift will make it easier for Democrats to win future presidential elections. He's out there saying that America will be a better country when whites are a minority, says the big fat white guy. And for him to be out there saying that he's celebrating the fact that white men are dying off, it's a good thing because it's going to help the Democrats. First of all, Michael Moore seems to be relatively clueless to the fact that the Democrats are having to resort to fraud even to stay in the race. So I guess we should be glad Michael Moore didn't run for president, because apparently his attitude is just execute anybody who doesn't vote our way. We'll be right back after these commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently the floodwaters are still rising in Texas. Harvey is not going to let go. And it is a tragedy, and it is a disaster. And our hearts and sympathies go out to these people who did not ask for, and contrary to what the liberals are saying, did not deserve this to happen to them. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Aloha. You said the FBI says lack of public interest in Hillary's email justifies withholding documents.
Yes.
I called my Congress last week, all three of them, the House and Senate for Oklahoma, and jumped on the idea and insisted that this be pursued, that I'm tired of hearing about our president having getting with the Russian president Putin and getting money and all this other stuff. I'm tired of that, because that doesn't exist. But what does exist is Hillary Clinton and all the stuff that she's pulled throughout her whole span of being in the White House and with Bill. And it needs to be pursued. All of it needs to be pursued, because it's a trail of all the stuff that she's done. And I really, I said all these things. And I expected my congressman to do something. I didn't know I needed to call the FBI and let them know that I'm interested. I mean, what do you do? I mean, who do you call to say, look, this woman is getting by with every thought, any conceivable idea. Let's give China the anti-ballistic missile information. Well, to me that's treason, because they didn't have it. And it just goes on, Then Foster, all these people that died, all these security people that went around with them, they died. It just goes on and on. Ron Brown, it's just, there is so much that they need to open it up. And can we, the American people, handle it? Well, it seems like we don't jump up and rush down to Washington and fill the streets and protest and stuff. But do you think finding that information out would make us do it? I kind of doubt it. We're all strapped. We don't have money.
Well, again, the issue is that everybody who's on the inside of this, they want to hang on to their jobs. It's a tough economy. It's hard finding work, especially finding work at federal government pay scales, which are so much higher than ordinary pay scales. And so they understand that if, in point of fact, Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server and then getting the paid and the money laundered through the charitable foundation, that's the kind of a scandal that brings entire governments down. And so even the people who hate Hillary Clinton with a passion are going to be working to keep the lid on this secret out of their own personal self-interest. Nobody wants to kill the entire government, because then they all have to go out and find real jobs.
Yeah, could you explain to me what you mean by it's going to bring, something on anybody is going to bring this government down? How's that going to happen?
Because it's all going to unravel, and the American people are going to realize that for all these decades, while the government is out there saying, don't do drugs, and we're going to jail drug criminals, the government itself, in the form of the Central Intelligence Agency, has become the biggest smuggler of illegal drugs into the country. People don't like hypocrites. And that's going to be one strike against the government. Then you have, again, as you say, Hillary Clinton has committed all these crimes while Secretary of State, and then you have Bill Clinton as governor and all of his philandering. And as you pointed out, there's all these dead bodies that are around the Clintons, and the number continues to grow even today. And the American people will not support a clearly unjust government. And then finally, of course, all of this going back to the 1980s and Iran-Contra, it tells you the government is unrepentant. It is irretrievably corrupt. And there's going to be no way to repair it from within. Certainly, I have been waiting in vain for anybody on the inside to stand up and say, look, we've gone in a bad direction. We need to change our course and head on back to being that constitutional republic. Everybody involved on the inside, they're making tons of money. They have huge amounts of power and influence and all those government perks. They don't want that to go away. They're hooked on all of that wealth and power. And they think that anybody who stands up that talks about how Vince Foster was actually murdered, well, they're a threat to the nation. They're a threat to national security because these people believe that their own personal security is the national security.
I tend to believe if they aired all this dirty laundry out in the public, we'd all try to digest it. And I don't think, unless we have somebody footing a bill saying, here's so much $1,000, go to Washington, hold up a sign, and get in the streets and act mad, just like they did with these two groups, the KKK and Who Matters.
Okay, Andrea, you've left out the third choice, and that is that the American people are so disgusted with the federal government that we stop filling out the paperwork, we stop signing the checks, we stop obeying their laws. We simply sit down, have a general strike, and say, to heck with this stuff. We're not going to vote for the continuance of this. Look at how Gandhi got the British out of India. The same thing could work here.
Well, I'm ready to do that. I think we're also disgusted. We're also mad, and we don't want to take it anymore. And I think we're there. I really do. I think we've been there for the last, at least since they pushed NAFTA and GATT, and especially TARP down our throat, which we all didn't want. We knew that they were destroying our government and our country when they started pushing all our jobs to other countries. It's just, I've been mad since then. It's made our country so weak and so awful that I don't know that they could throw an avalanche of information on us that would make it a big difference. I'm just really so upset about the whole thing.
I know you are. Yeah. I know you are. But, Andrea, most Americans right now, they're aware that something has gone horribly wrong with the country. But most Americans are probably still clinging to this belief that somehow the system will resurrect itself, that we're only really dealing with a few rogues within the government. But if it comes on out, all the CIA drug and gun running, the Clintons' involvement, the Bush's involvement, the American people are basically going to have no choice but to have to stand up and say, we can't accept this any longer. Because if it's that much in their face just how evil this government has become, they're not going to want to live with themselves and say, yeah, I'm okay with this. Again, I understand your rage and your frustration and your anger. I really, really, really do. I've been at this for 24 years now. I've devoted a third of my life, ever since I got blacklisted out of Hollywood over the Vincent Foster affair, I have devoted my life to try and bring some justice to the situation. I'm as frustrated as you are, but I draw the line at calling for any kind of violence by the American people for a very pragmatic reason. If there's one thing this federal government does really, really well, it's kill people. And they've killed somewhere like 20 million since the end of World War II. They won't hesitate to kill the American people who get in their way. Look at Waco. Look at the Oklahoma City bombing. That's the reality. And I don't want to see innocent people killed and crippled. I understand there's going to come a point where I can't hold it back. And that, who knows what's going to happen then.
Okay, now, why is it the FBI gets to say lack of public interest and Hillary's email justifies withholding documents? Why does the FBI get to say that?
Well,
and how actually, do we get to the FBI?
Actually, they don't get to say that. They're stepping outside their authority as an investigative body. And James Comey did the same thing when he went down that laundry list of Hillary's Title 18 felony violations, and then he said, we recommend no charges because she didn't intend to do wrong. That's not the FBI's job. The FBI's job was to basically say, we have prosecutable cases for this, this, and this, and this, and hand them to the Attorney General and let the Attorney General make that determination. Of course, I'm sure that Loretta Lynch was very glad that Comey made it so easy for her. But yeah, the FBI's job is as an investigative agency. They don't get to make those judgment calls. But again, if this information, if these emails risk the exposure of a massive espionage plot taking place in the heart of our government, which included possibly the serving Secretary of State, Imran Awan, and all these other IT experts, which we know were stealing information from House members' computers and sending it overseas, and who knows where all else. This thing could be just a gigantic scandal, and the American people, they're going to stand there and say, I can't pretend to be okay with this anymore.
We know it's a scandal because we've all been calling it a swamp. And we know that there's monsters in the swamp. And we really wanted it cleaned out. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, you got it, Andrea. Thank you very much. Well, maybe instead of draining the swamp, maybe we should drone the swamp. It's going to be a lot faster, and it's not like we're running out of those things yet. Okay, let's go back to the phones. Rob in Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, it's a tentacle of scandals. It's one scandal into another scandal into another scandal. If you ever look at like the Verizon map and where their coverage is,
yes,
and it's got all those lines that spread out across the country, well, that's the scandals. They're all spread out throughout the country. Now they take that and put it around the globe, because then it starts going around the globe. All that tentacle of scandal. It's one into the other, and the other, and the other. Ridiculousness. You know, when you reported the FBI story, how they won't release the emails, that the American public's just not interested. I had a deja vu. Didn't you report that story like a couple weeks ago or so?
I reported that was the spin that was being put out by Hillary's people, that the American public just wasn't interested in the email scandal anymore, and that's why people weren't going to be, that there was no interest in pursuing it within the government. And it was ludicrous then, and it's ludicrous now. Of course we are. One of the reasons Donald Trump won that election was on this promise that Hillary Clinton would be prosecuted and sent to prison. You know, remember all the chanting, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up? Well, you know.
I know.
I still want that.
I know, during the debate, he said you'd be in jail. We all know that. I mean, anyone else paying attention? So now the FBI has just made it official, so it's a continuation of that story. Now it's just official by the FBI.
Yes.
Gotcha. You know, talking to the woman before, she's like, you know, we're kind of broke. We want to do something, you know, but we're strapped. We're broke. I mean, the people in Harvey, you know, when I think about Harvey, why didn't they evacuate? You know, a lot of those people probably are strapped for cash. Where would they go? You know what I mean? Maybe they wanted to go if their local government, you know, mayor and so on, gave them the chance to go somewhere. Maybe they said, maybe even if they could, where would they go? What money do they have to go somewhere, you know? So, I mean, being broke puts you in bad situations, you know?
Yes.
Having money affords you opportunities, you know, which these
that's why,
mega millionaires and billionaires.
That's why every tyranny tries to get rid of the middle class. They want us as poor as possible because that keeps us obedient. They want us dependent because that keeps us enslaved. I mean, the goal of any tyrannical government is to extract the maximum work product out of their population for the absolute minimum upkeep.
Well, that's part of the 8 steps of creating a socialist society. Impoverish them.
Yes.
Okay. Where was I going? I wanted to ask, there's a couple stories I wanted to know if you covered, and one is, did I hear it from you in the previous couple days, where how the Syrian forces are closing in on ISIS, that the American forces were caught airlifting ISIS leaders out of the area before the Syrian forces got there. Did you report that?
I did.
I couldn't find the story. Where did you pull that up at?
It's going to be on the main page of whatreallyhappened.com. The problem is we do so many stories, very often it can scroll off the bottom. So if you go to the very bottom of the main page, you'll see a series of buttons, 2, 3, 4, which are the other pages. The other thing that you can do is do a Google search for U.S. airlifts ISIS leadership, followed by site, SITE, whatreallyhappened.com. And that will basically search, that will give you a Google search of just my web page, and that may bring it up as well.
No, that's fine. I Google searched for keywords and I couldn't find it. I didn't look on your website. I apologize. I didn't realize it would be there. Here's the other one. Did you catch the Bulgarian reporter?
Yes.
Outing. You did catch that one.
Yeah, we did catch that one and outed the use of diplomatic flights to smuggle weapons into the smugglers, and then she got interrogated and fired.
That's right. And you mentioned it may go, I'm not sure if it was you. Did you mention that it may go all the way back to Rumsfeld?
I did not, but I would not be surprised if it did.
How it may have started with Rumsfeld and then Hillary put it on steroids.
Yes.
No?
Well, we know
Okay.
we know that Hillary was smuggling weapons into Syria to give to ISIS and Al Qaeda from that hub at the consulate in Benghazi. That was the heart of the smuggling operation, to get the weapons from Libya to Syria, and that was one of the reasons they wanted that facility to burn to the ground, was to erase all the records.
Mm-hmm. Well, I caught an interview with this woman from Bulgaria this morning. It was one of her very first that she's been giving out. Now she's getting inundated with requests for interviews, but I caught one of her very first this morning. If I can find the radio archive, I'll forward it to you, okay?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
It was beautiful. I mean, this thing is just goosebumps. One of your callers talked about, I think he talked about Antifa.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone's got to know, just stay out of it. Stay away from them. Mike, as you noticed, when people come up and they're anti-Antifa, they're pro-free speech and so on, and they get together with them, then Antifa gets to take out their anger and their frustration and all their propaganda, and then they get someone to fight. But when the other people don't show up, who do they take it out on? They take it out on the property, they take it out on the police, and they take it out on those other things, and that's when they get exposed. Everyone's got to realize, stay away from there, because you may get hurt, it may cost you hospital bills, it may even land you in jail.
Or the morgue.
And it's even giving the government more reasons to, take away more of your rights. You know what I mean? So we don't want to give them more reasons to take away more of our rights. So just stay away from these people. Because as you know, in history, because we know these are the useful idiots. We know these are like the brown shirts and so on.
That's exactly right. I was about to say that.
And what happened to them? They got eliminated. They were the first to go when that government took over.
By their own leaders, themselves. The night of the long knives. Okay, right. Rob, we're going to have to let you go.
Absolutely.
Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Now, as you know, the Bundy trials are continuing on. People have been released for freedom. Two of them are going to be tried for a third time, even though on this last trial, the jury deadlocked 11-1 in favor of not guilty. But by golly, they're going to go after these people. And so we posted this flashback story from Lou Dobbs, who basically came on out and said the issue for that Bundy land, the reason they wanted it, is that it was desired by this Chinese solar company that had ties to Harry Reid's son, wanted that land. And of course, the Bundys didn't want to sell at any price, so by golly, we'll just go on in there and find a way to take it away from them. And that's how this all began. Now, this coming October, the last of the classified JFK assassination records are due to be declassified. Now, of course, over the intervening years, we have no idea what's been edited, what's been simply removed. But I'm looking at that precedent where they decided not to release the last of Hillary Clinton's emails because the public isn't interested. I'm wondering, are they going to do the same thing here? Oh, nobody cares about John F. Kennedy anymore. We're gonna keep these last few files secret, I think. You know, at this point, I know details are important. But there comes a time where you step back and you say, you know something? We are all 100% in agreement that this government is lying to us. Let's just stop there and decide what are we going to do next. Because I will not live under a government that lies to us. I refuse to allow our children to grow up under a government that lies to them. And so there we are. There's our one common connection with each other. We know the government is lying. We know the corporate media helps them do it. We don't need to know any more than that. It's time to decide, what are we going to do? Now, do you remember this lady, Ursula Haverbeck? She was charged with Holocaust denial, and apparently she was also convicted of sedition, and she has now been sent to prison for Holocaust denial. And it's rather interesting because if you claim you've been taken for a ride in a flying saucer, you don't get arrested. You tell people you've seen Bigfoot, you don't lose your career. You tell people you think Elvis or Michael Jackson are still alive, they'll laugh at you, but that's it. But boy, you question that Orthodox history of World War II and you are going to jail. Kind of makes it obvious they're hiding something, doesn't it? If they weren't hiding something, they wouldn't care. They would treat the Holocaust deniers with the same ridicule as the flying saucer and the Loch Ness Monster people and all the rest of it. All right, there's the music. Time for Claire and I to get on out of here and have a little bit of a celebration. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.